What's up guys, Jason here and welcome back to another tier list video. In today's video we are going to be doing a ranking of Pixar films. That's right, I'm going to be ranking every Pixar film accordingly. I am going to be doing this in chronological order and these will be my opinions on whether or not I like each movie. So yeah, if you enjoy this video and want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and let me know in the comments down below. It would really help out a ton. But without further ado, let's get on with the tier list. First up, we have the one that started it all, the original Toy Story. This will always be a classic. This movie is one of those movies that's still being talked about even after 30 years. Or almost 30 years. It will be 30 years in 2025. A tier. It's not quite a perfect Pixar movie because Woody was, kind of a jerk in this movie, but it's still a very solid movie and a very humble and solid beginning for Pixar. Up next we have A Bug's Life, the only non-Toy Story movie to be released before 2000. This is an underrated gem. It's basically about ants who start a revolution against grasshoppers that basically enslave the ants. So I know it's kind of a knockoff of Ants, and I kind of like Ants better, but A Bug's Life is still a pretty good movie in its own right, and the villain, Hopper, is probably one of the scariest villains out there, at least in Pixar history. So yeah, I'm going B tier for A Bug's Life. It's a very solid movie. Toy Story 2, definitely S tier. You definitely saw this coming. Toy Story 2 is not only the best sequel in all of history, one of the best sequels, but it's also one of the best Pixar movies. So yeah, that's why I picked Toy Story. It expands the story of Woody, and yeah, that's why I put it in S tier. Monsters Incorporated, also S tier. It's one of my personal favorite Pixar movies of all time. I think it's better than Finding Nemo. I know a lot of people prefer Finding Nemo over this movie, but I prefer Monsters, Inc. The story is just very compelling, can get dark at times, and Randall Boggs is actually a very intimidating villain. Steve Buscemi did a very good job voicing him. And Mr. Waternoose, I kind of felt bad for Waternoose. He's evil, but he did what he did for a good cause. He's trying to save his company, even though it's not justifiable. What he's doing, like kidnapping kids, that's unjustifiable right there. But I can definitely see where he's coming from. He's like a tragic villain that will do anything to save his company. But yeah, Monsters, Inc., S tier. Definitely S tier. Finding Nemo. Despite not liking this movie as much as Monsters, Inc., it's still a really good movie. It still deserves A tier. It's a fun little story about a fish who goes out to look for his son, and he meets this forgetful fish named Dory, played by Ellen DeGeneres. And yeah, overall, it's a really good movie in my opinion. The Incredibles, also A tier. If you know me, I love superhero movies. Especially Spider-Man. I absolutely love Spider-Man, and I love superhero movies. I've been getting into the MCU films. I've been watching the Avengers movies, and the Doctor Strange movies, the Thor movies, Captain America, Iron Man, all those movies. I've been watching that. But The Incredibles is just so action-packed. Like, the villain, played by Jason Lee, is just very intimidating. And, wow, it just teaches you that you cannot count on anyone, especially your heroes. And in a way, Syndrome's right. You can't count on anyone, basically, in a way, And the story is just, oh my god, it's a beautiful story about family and super stuff and all those powers. But yeah, that's why The Incredibles is an A tier. Cars, at first, I was pretty bored with it, but saying that, when I watched Cars 3 for like the second time, it made me appreciate Cars 1 more. So I'm gonna put it in B tier. It's not an excellent movie, but it's not an awful movie either. It's a pretty solid film, and Lightning can be a bit of a jerk, especially in the beginning of the movie, but he changes over time. So yeah, it's in B tier. The reason it's not lower is because it's a pretty good story about a race car. Up next, we have Ratatouille, probably one of the more boring Pixar movies. I'm gonna go with C tier. I don't know, when I tried watching Ratatouille a couple times, and I fell asleep about 20, 30 minutes in. Yeah, it was just a very boring movie in my opinion. I mean, a rat teaching a guy how to cook? So what? You know? But that's just me though. WALL-E, again, C tier. It's another boring movie. I mean, the chemistry between WALL-E and Eve is pretty nice, but other than that, I just found it very boring. I mean, every human is fat. Come on, there's got to be a skinny human somewhere. Up, B tier. It's actually a nice story about an old man and a little boy, a scout, who end up going on this adventure after the old guy, Carl Fredricksen, he ties up like hundreds of balloons and he goes up into the sky and he's trying to find this place that he and his late wife always wanted to go to. And, you know, the scene with him and his wife, it's very wholesome, and, like, I was so sad when the wife died. Ellie, I think her name is. Yeah, when she died, it was just so sad. So sad. But yeah, that's why it's in B tier, because it's a really fun movie. Toy Story 3, not nearly as good as the other movies. I'm gonna go with B tier on it. It's still a pretty solid movie, and when Andy gives the toys to Bonnie, it's pretty wholesome at the end, you know? And Lotso is kind of a cardboard copy of Stinky Pete, except Stinky Pete kind of did the villain better, so yeah, that's why Toy Story 3 isn't really that much higher. Cars 2. F tier. It's definitely one of the worst movies out there. I mean, even though Lightning McQueen is on the middle of the cover, the movie focuses on Mater and espionage. I hate this movie. I absolutely hate this movie. I feel like it would have been a much better movie if you had gotten rid of the espionage, given Lightning McQueen the spotlight, and made it about the World Grand Prix, and that's it. That would have made for a much better movie. But no, they wanted to be all cool and hip with the kids. Damn it, I remember seeing this in theaters. My mom and my brother wanted to see Cars 2, but I wanted to see Kung Fu Panda 2. But my mom was like, nah, you don't want to see Kung Fu Panda, that's boring. I'm telling you, to this day, I wish I had seen Kung Fu Panda 2 in theaters, because Kung Fu Panda 2 is a much better movie than Cars 2. Cars 2 is just trash. Brave, D tier. I don't really remember this movie too much, and I think it's the only Pixar movie that I didn't actually see in theaters, or at least the ones that were released in theaters. I don't really remember much. All I remember is that it's basically a movie about, like, Scotland / Vikings and whatnot. But all I'm gonna say about it is that How to Train Your Dragon did it better. So yeah, that's just me though. Monsters University, C tier. It was not needed. I would have much rather it have been a sequel to Monsters Inc. than like a prequel. And we kind of got it in Monsters at Work. But again, even though it's a sequel, I would have preferred it to be a movie than a series. You know, like transitioning from scare power to laugh power. So yeah, that's why Monsters University gets C tier. Inside Out, B tier. It's pretty funny at times. One of my favorite comedians, Louis Black, is in this movie, and, you know, it's just an overall heartwarming, funny movie. The Good Dinosaur. As a dinosaur fan, I didn't really care for this movie. I showed off this movie previously in, like, the bad dinosaur movies tier list. How does it stand up? C tier. It's not a terrible movie, but it's not a great movie either. I mean, the bond between Arlo and Spot is kind of heartwarming. But if you want, and he loses his dad, Arlo loses his dad, which is pretty sad. If you want, an animated dinosaur movie, you're better off watching either Disney's Dinosaur or The Land Before Time. You're just better off watching one of those movies, because you'll get a much better result. Finding Dory, D tier. It's, again, not necessary. We already had this trope with Finding Nemo. We don't need another movie where it's just Finding Nemo except with Dory instead of Nemo. So that's why I say D tier. Cars 3. Definitely an improvement from Cars 2, but it's not quite as good as Cars 1. I'm going to say C tier. At first I thought it was better than Cars 1 when I first watched it in theaters, but when I watched it the second time on DVD, I have to say, it made me appreciate Cars 1 more. So that's why I'm giving it C tier. And I love how they brought the focus back on Lightning McQueen. So yeah, Cars 3, C tier. Coco, another classic. Well, not a classic, it's a more recent film, but probably one of the better ones. I'm gonna have to say A tier. The animation is just fantastic. The music is astounding. And the characters are just very likable. I remember Miguel and Hector and Ernesto de la Cruz. I mean, Ernesto de la Cruz was kind of a cliched villain, but other than that, a relatively good movie. That's why I say A tier. Incredibles 2. I'm gonna have to say B tier. It's not quite as good as the first movie, but it's still pretty solid. The action's great. I kind of wish the focus was on Mr. Incredible instead of Elastigirl, but alas, Or maybe even the kids. The kids would have made a much better focus than Elastigirl. But that's just me, though. Toy Story 4, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to say C tier. I liked it at first, but overall it's not really as good as the other three movies. The biggest problem I have with it is Woody's choice to stay with Bo Peep. I would have fixed the movie by having Woody and Bo go back with the other toys, and the ending was kind of, I think we need a Toy Story 5 to make up for this. We need one more Toy Story movie and make it a complete circle where Woody and Bo end up reuniting with the other toys, and yeah, that's why Toy Story 4 gets C tier. Onward, honestly, I don't remember much from this movie. C tier. I'm just gonna say this one thing. The story is kind of nice. The fantasy, the idea of fantasy in modern times is kind of cool. But yeah, C tier. I don't really know much about this movie. I only watched it once. It was alright, I guess. Soul. I'm gonna have to say S tier. It basically tells the story of life really well. Basically, the message of this movie is basically to teach you that you don't have to worry about how you're gonna live your life, but instead maybe just do it. Just live your life. You don't have to worry about how you're gonna live your life, just do it. And they tell this story really well. So yeah, that's why I'm saying S tier for Soul. Luca, I don't really know much about this movie. Kind of boring. I'm just gonna say C tier. I don't know. I guess the concept is good, but the racing part, I feel like they got it out of Cars. They kind of ripped it off from Cars. So if you want a movie about racing, you're better off watching Cars. So yeah, that's why I give it C tier. Turning Red, D tier. This movie is just a mess. A real mess. They try way too hard to be hip with the current generation, and the story just isn't very compelling. Red pandas? Really? Wouldn't it make much more sense if they just used, regular pandas? But anyway, that's why it gets D tier. And last but not least, Lightyear. Yes, I have seen this movie. I actually saw it yesterday. And there could be spoilers on the way, so I'm just going to warn you right now. This movie, I'm going to say C tier. The only reason it's not higher on the list is because we already technically had an origin story for Buzz Lightyear in the form of Buzz Lightyear Star Command. I feel like an origin story for Woody would have made more sense because we really don't know too much about Woody apart from what we got in Toy Story 2. So yeah, I feel like a movie about Woody would have made much more sense, in my opinion. But yeah, that's the tier list for you. In S tier, we have Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc., and Soul. For A tier, we have Toy Story, Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Coco. For B tier, we have A Bug's Life, Cars, Up, Toy Story 3, Inside Out, and Incredibles 2. For C tier, we have Ratatouille, WALL-E, Monsters University, The Good Dinosaur, Cars 3, Toy Story 4, Onward, Luca, and Lightyear. For D tier, we have Brave, Finding Dory, and Turning Red. And for F tier, we've got Cars 2. But yeah, if you agree with this tier list, then great for you. If you don't, then let me know what your tier list would look like in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. It would really help out a ton. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. So long!